In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this leather keychain with just a few basic leather making supplies. It's a great beginner project for those who, like me, are new to leatherworking. Hi friends, I'm Carrie and this is Dream Up. On this channel, I share tutorials, tips, reviews, and the occasional fail in an attempt to tangify my imagination. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. If you'd like to see this tutorial, but you just can't stand my face or my voice, I understand completely. Click that notification bell and come back here on Fridays for a Carrie-free Friday version of this video. I was in a play recently called Baskerville, a Sherlock Holmes mystery. As a parting gift to my castmates, I wanted to make them something to remember our show by. I wanted something with a Sherlock Holmes theme that was relatively easy to make and wouldn't cost me a lot of money, and I came up with this leather keychain.
I made this keychain using a few basic leatherworking supplies. It has a custom printed canvas inset, the name and dates of our show on the back, and a tiny little magnifying glass to go with the Sherlock Holmes theme. I start by sketching out my pattern. It was important to me to have a nice size that would fit in my hand well, accommodate the keyring, and to leave enough room for me on the back to add the name of the show and our run dates. This first attempt was the right size, but I didn't like the shape. I decided to design the template in Canvas Workspace. Canvas Workspace is a web app that allows me to change or create cutting and drawing designs for my brother's scan and cut machine. I was really happy with this new pattern, and I'll put it up on my website in case you're interested in trying it yourself. I purchased some leather belt blanks that were wide enough for the project, but I disliked the look of the thicker leather. You can see my prototypes here are too bulky to work well with the inlaid piece. I ended up using some thinner leather scraps I had lying around instead. I think this thinner piece is much better. Another advantage of the thinner leather is that I was able to cut the patterns out directly on my scan and cut machine. If you try this yourself, proceed at your own risk, but mine worked beautifully. The next step is to apply a stain before we assemble the piece. I wore leather gloves and used a cotton ball to stain the leather with Eco-Flo leather dye in Timber Brown. Then I set that aside to dry. Next, I worked on the inlay. I wanted the inset layer of the keychain to look like a page from a book. I typed up a bunch of Sherlock Holmes phrases as well as a few select phrases from our play. I filled a few columns with this text, changed it to a nice scribbly font, and realized I needed to add a little bit more. For my first attempt, I printed this directly onto cotton muslin with my laser printer and some freezer paper. The print turned out smaller and not as dark as I liked. The cotton muslin ended up being too thin for my tastes as well. I decided to try canvas instead. I was worried the canvas would be too thick to run through my laser printer, so I opted for a transfer technique using gel medium and a reversed printed image. Here, I've increased the font size and printed the image in reverse. I cut a small piece of canvas, and using the reversed print from my laser printer, I used some gel medium to transfer this image to the canvas. The technique is very simple. Lay some gel medium down onto the printed side of your paper. Lay the paper face down on top of your canvas and smooth it out. I use the back of a brush and my fingers to get out all the little air bubbles and set it aside to dry. Next, I'll work on finishing the inner edge of the front of the keychain. I sanded the inner ring with different grits of sandpaper, each one a little bit finer than the one before. Once it was pretty smooth, I finished it off with a wooden slicking tool. Then I cleaned up the inside with just a little more stain. At this point, I decided to see if the gel medium had dried. Yep, it looks like it's going to stick, so I add a little bit of water and then just friction with my fingers to pull and rub the little bits of paper that were left over. The next step is to sandwich the little piece of canvas between the two halves of the leather. I used a fabric marking pen to decide where I wanted to cut the piece, and once I cut that out, I sandwiched it in between the two pieces of leather using a little bit of contact cement. I added the canvas first and then coated the inside of the ring. Don't forget to add the keyring before you close up the piece, otherwise you'll never get it apart. I added this clamp and set the whole thing aside to dry. Next, I wanted to finish the outer edge. I taped off the canvas on the inside with a little bit of painter's tape to keep it clean. And then I sanded the edges like before, with different grits of sandpaper, and finished up with the slicking tool. I considered stamping the show name and date onto the back of the leather, but given my inexperience, I opted for something else. The transfer technique worked well with the canvas, so I tried it out on a scrap of leather and got pretty good results. Next, I added the stitching. I punched a few holes near the top of the keychain to help keep it closed. I originally wanted to stitch all the way around to the outside, but my prototypes looked a bit too handmade for my liking, so I decided to add the stitching to just this top part with some waxed linen. I coated everything with a layer of wax and added the hardware. First, I added the snap clip. And as a final touch, I added these little magnifying glasses. And this is my finished product. I'll link the pattern and the supply list below. And if you make this project, I'd love to see your photos. Share it on Instagram with the hashtag DreamUpMaker. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video, I'd sure appreciate it if you'd hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing to see what I dream up next.